Jiwon stared at her scanner screen and felt her blood turn cold. The reading made no sense. She ran the diagnostic program 3 times, checking for errors, but the results stayed the same. Something was out there in the dark between stars, moving slowly through the void, something that shouldn't exist. She leaned closer to her console, her long fingers dancing across the controls. The ship's signature was strange. Primitive, the hull composition showed welded metal plates, not the smooth energy-bonded alloys that every civilized species used. The propulsion system burned chemicals instead of using quantum drives. Even the gravity plating flickered on and off, like a dying light. It looked like something from a museum, or from a grave. "Navigator Jiwon, report." Commander Talrix's voice crackled through her headset. The commander was a veteran officer, old and tired, counting the days until his retirement. "Sir, I have an unidentified vessel on long-range sensors," Jiwon said. She tried to keep her voice steady. "It doesn't match any known species in the database." "Run it again. Probably just sensor drift. We're too far out for anything interesting to happen." The commander sounded bored. Jiwon wanted to argue, but she knew better. She was only 23 cycles old, fresh out of the academy, and this was her first real assignment. Navigator positions on scout ships were meant to be boring, safe, a way for young Velari to serve their mandatory duty without any real danger. But Jiwon had never been good at following safe paths. She waited until Commander Talrix went to his quarters for his afternoon rest. Then she did something that could get her court-martialed. She accessed the ancient archives, the ones that held records from before the unification, back when the galaxy was wild and dangerous. She entered the ship's signature into the old database and waited. The results made her hands shake. Human design. Pattern Delta 7. Origin. Earth Sol System. Last recorded sighting. 2047 cycles ago. During the Purge era, humans were extinct. Everyone knew that. They were taught about it in history class, in the section about cautionary tales and mistakes that should never be repeated. Humans came from a death world, a planet with crushing gravity, poisonous atmosphere, and predators that could kill in seconds. Somehow, humans had evolved on that nightmare world and survived. Then they discovered faster-than-light travel and exploded into the galaxy. They didn't ask permission. They didn't follow the rules. They settled on worlds that other species had claimed, took resources from systems that belonged to established empires, and fought anyone who tried to stop them. They were violent, unpredictable, and impossible to control. The Korvath Dominion had demanded their submission. The humans refused. The Velari Empire had offered them a place in the galactic community, with rules and regulations. The humans ignored them. The Thelxian Confederacy had tried to negotiate trade agreements. The humans had laughed and taken what they wanted anyway. So the 3 great powers had done something that had never been done before. They had united their fleets and gone to war against a single species. The humans had fought back with a ferocity that shocked the galaxy. They used weapons that violated every convention of war. They fought when they should have surrendered. They kept coming back even when their fleets were destroyed. The war had lasted 12 years. In the end, the humans lost. Earth was glassed from orbit, turned into a radioactive tomb. Every human colony was hunted down and destroyed. Every human ship was blown apart. The species was wiped from existence. Or so everyone thought. Jiwon looked at her scanner again. The ship was still there, moving slowly toward Velari space. She pulled up more detailed readings. The hull showed signs of combat damage, some of it old, some of it recent. Sections had been patched with metal from different sources, creating a patchwork of colors and materials. One entire wing looked like it had been welded on from a completely different ship. This vessel had been fighting, and it had been surviving. She made a decision that would change her life forever. Jiwon plotted a new course, altering her patrol route by 0.7 degrees. It was a small change, nothing that would trigger automatic alerts. But it would bring her scout ship into intercept range with the unknown vessel in 72 hours. She didn't tell Commander Talrix. She didn't report it to Fleet Command. She knew what they would do. They would send warships. They would destroy the vessel before asking questions. They would make sure that whatever was on that ship died before it could threaten the Empire. But Ji-won had to know. She had to see if humans were really still alive out there, hiding in the dark spaces between stars. The next 3 days crawled by like years. Ji-won did her regular duties, checking navigation charts, monitoring communication channels, and filing routine reports. She smiled at Commander Talrix when he made his terrible jokes. She ate her meals in the ship's small galley. She pretended everything was normal, but at night, in her cramped quarters, she read everything she could find about humans. The official histories painted them as monsters, savage beasts who knew only violence. But Ji-won found other accounts too, buried in old files. Stories about human doctors who had saved alien lives during the war. Records of human ships that had rescued survivors from destroyed vessels, even when those survivors were their enemies. Reports of human colonies that had traded fairly with alien neighbors, sharing resources and technology. The histories were written by the winners, but maybe they hadn't told the whole truth. On the 3rd day, her scanner picked up the ship again. Closer now, close enough to get detailed images. Ji-won felt her breath catch in her throat. The ship was bigger than she had thought, maybe 300 meters long. The hull was scarred with plasma burns and projectile impacts. Entire sections were dark, the lights inside dead or broken, but other sections glowed with power, showing that something inside was still alive. She saw words painted on the hull in faded white letters. The language was human, one that wasn't spoken anymore, except by scholars. But Ji-won had studied it during her research. The words said, "Indomitable." She reached for her communication controls, her hand hovering over the broadcast button. Once she sent a signal, there would be no going back. If this really was a human ship, if they really had survived for 2,000 cycles, then everything she did next would matter. She thought about Commander Talrix, asleep in his quarters, dreaming of retirement. She thought about the academy, where they had taught her to follow orders and never question authority. She thought about the history books and their stories about savage humans who deserved to die. Then she thought about that ship, limping through space, held together with hope and desperation. Ji-won pressed the button and began broadcasting on every frequency she could access. "Unknown vessel, this is Valari scout ship Whisper of Stars. Please identify yourself. I mean you no harm. Please respond." She waited in the silence, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. And then, after an eternity, her speaker crackled to life. The voice that came through Ji-won's speakers was rough and strange, speaking Galactic Common with an accent so thick she could barely understand it. "Valari ship. This is Captain Hyun-woo of the Indomitable. We read you. Please state your intentions." Ji-won's hands trembled as she replied, "Captain Hyun-woo. I am Navigator Ji-won. I detected your ship on my scanners and wanted to make contact. Are you human?" There was a long pause. Then the voice came back, and this time she could hear the wariness in it. "Yes, we are human. Is that a problem?" "No," Ji-won said quickly. Too quickly. She took a breath and tried again. "No, it's not a problem. We thought you were extinct." "Everyone thinks you're extinct." Another pause. "We've been working hard to keep it that way. Why are you contacting us alone? Where is your battle fleet?" "There is no fleet. Just me. And my commander. But he's asleep." Ji-won realized how foolish that sounded. "I didn't report you. I wanted to talk first." "Why?" The suspicion in the captain's voice was clear. "Because I wanted to know the truth," Ji-won said. "About humans. About what really happened." The silence stretched so long that Ji-won thought the connection had been lost. Then Captain Hyun-woo spoke again, his voice slightly softer. "Navigator Ji-won, you're either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both. My ship is damaged. We need supplies. Food, medical equipment, replacement parts for our life support system. Can you help us, or should we move on before your commander wakes up and calls for backup?" Ji-won made her second life-changing decision in 3 days. "I can help. I have supply authorization for emergency situations, but I need to see your ship first. I need to meet you face to face. That's a bad idea. Probably, Ji-won agreed. But I'm going to do it anyway. She heard what might have been a laugh. You're definitely brave and stupid. All right, navigator. We'll send you docking coordinates. Come alone. And keep your weapons holstered. We've survived this long by being careful. Don't give us a reason to regret this. 72 minutes later, Ji-won's small shuttle approached the Indomitable. Up close, the human ship looked even worse. The hull was a mess of different metals and materials, welded together like a giant puzzle. Some sections were scorched black from plasma fire. Others had been patched with plates that didn't quite fit, leaving gaps that had been sealed with some kind of metallic foam. It was ugly and crude and should have fallen apart years ago, but it was still flying. The airlock opened, and Ji-won stepped inside. The gravity felt slightly wrong, fluctuating just enough to make her stomach uneasy. The air smelled strange, like oil and recycled oxygen and something else she couldn't identify. 2 humans waited for her in the corridor. The first was tall and broad, with short dark hair and eyes that looked tired. His arms were made of metal and synthetic materials, prosthetics that had been built and rebuilt so many times they barely looked human anymore. He wore a stained jumpsuit with patches on both knees. I'm Dae-hyun, he said. Chief Engineer. Sorry about the gravity. I'm doing my best. But we're running on backup systems. The second human was smaller, female, with scars across her face and neck. She carried a weapon that looked homemade, all rough edges and exposed wiring. Her eyes were hard and watchful. Minji, she said shortly. Security. Try anything stupid and you'll regret it. I'm just here to talk, Ji-won said, trying not to stare at them. Humans looked so much like Velari, but different in small ways. Shorter, more compact. Built for heavier gravity, their skin tones varied wildly, from pale to dark, and their hair came in different colors. This way, Dae-hyun said. He led her through corridors that were barely wide enough for 2 people. Pipes ran along the ceiling, some of them dripping condensation. The walls were covered with handwritten signs in multiple languages, some of which Ji-won recognized and many she didn't. They passed other humans, an old woman with white hair who was welding a broken panel, a young man carrying a box of tools, 3 children who stopped playing and stared at Ji-won with wide eyes until their mother hurried them away. You have children on this ship? Ji-won asked in surprise. We have 200 people on this ship, Minji said. Families. Workers. Fighters. This isn't just a warship. It's our home. The only home we have. They reached a door that had "Bridge" written on it in 5 different languages. Inside, the room was cramped and dark, lit only by the glow of control panels and screens. A man stood at the center, studying a holographic display of star charts. He turned when Ji-won entered, and she got her first look at Captain Hyun-woo. He was younger than she had expected, maybe 35 or 40 cycles old, with dark hair that was starting to gray at the temples. His face was lined with stress and exhaustion, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. He wore a captain's uniform that had been patched and repaired so many times the original fabric was barely visible. Navigator Ji-won, he said, his accent still thick but easier to understand in person. Welcome to the Indomitable. I apologize for the mess. We weren't expecting guests. Captain Hyun-woo, Ji-won said. She tried to bow in the formal Velari greeting, but the fluctuating gravity made her stumble. Dae-hyun caught her arm and steadied her. Skip the formalities, Hyun-woo said. We don't have time for them. You said you could help us. What do you want in return? I want answers, Ji-won said. How are you alive? Where have you been? Why hasn't anyone seen you? Hyun-woo gestured to a chair. Ji-won sat down, and the captain leaned against his console. 6 generations ago, he began. When the 3 empires came to destroy Earth, a few of our people managed to escape. Not many. Maybe 10,000. Spread across a dozen colony ships. Most of those ships were caught and destroyed, but 3 made it out. 3 ships full of refugees who went into deep sleep and drifted into the dark parts of the galaxy where no one else wanted to go. He paused, his eyes distant. My ancestors woke up 50 years later, alone and hunted. They found the ruins of another colony ship and salvaged what they could. Then they did what humans do best. They survived. They scavenged technology from abandoned stations. They traded with pirates and smugglers who didn't ask questions. They stayed in the forgotten places between empires, the places where laws don't reach. And you've been hiding for 2,000 cycles? Jiwan asked. Hiding. Fighting. Surviving. Minji spoke up from where she stood, guard by the door. Do you know what happens when someone discovers a human ship? They don't ask questions. They don't offer help. They shoot first and celebrate later. We've learned to be ghosts, Daehyun added. We scavenge from battlefields. We strip abandoned ships. We take what we need from those who hunt us. He held up his prosthetic arms. These came from a Korvath hunter ship. They tried to board us 5 years ago. Now their technology keeps me working. Hyunwoo continued. The Indomitable used to be called something else. A colony transport ship. But we've rebuilt it piece by piece. It has Korvath shields, Valari sensors, Thelxian weapons, and human stubbornness holding it all together. How many humans are left? Jiwan asked quietly. We don't know, Hyunwoo admitted. We've made contact with 2 other survivor groups over the years. Maybe a few thousand of us total, scattered across a dozen ships, all of us running. All of us just trying to stay alive. That's why you need help, Jiwan said, understanding now. You're running out of time. Our life support is failing, Daehyun said bluntly. I've patched it 17 times. I can maybe patch it once or twice more before it dies completely. We need parts. Real parts, not scavenged junk, and we need food. Our hydroponics bay was damaged in our last fight, and we're running low. Hyunwoo looked at Jiwan directly. So here's my question for you, Navigator. Can you help us? Or did we just make a terrible mistake by trusting you? Jiwan thought about her career, her duty, her oath to the Valari Empire. She thought about what would happen if anyone discovered she was helping humans. Then she thought about the children she had seen in the corridor, and the old woman welding pipes, and this battered ship that refused to die. I can help, she said. I'll transfer supplies from my ship. Food, medical equipment, and technical components. It won't be enough for everything, but it will keep you alive. And what do you want in return? Hyunwoo asked again. Nobody helps for free. Jiwan smiled. You're right. I want something. I want you to teach me about humans. The real truth. Not the propaganda. And I want to know where you're going next, because I think your hiding days might be ending soon, whether you want them to or not. Hyunwoo studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, Navigator Jiwan. Let's make a deal. Over the next 8 days, Jiwan learned what it meant to be human. She shuttled supplies to the Indomitable whenever Commander Talrix was asleep or busy with his reports. Food rations that she claimed were damaged. Medical supplies that she listed as used in training exercises. Technical components that she said were being replaced for maintenance. In return, Captain Hyunwoo shared information that was worth more than gold. The humans had been mapping the galaxy's underworld for generations. They knew things that the empires had forgotten or never knew at all. They knew which asteroid fields hid pirate bases. They knew which neutral stations were actually fronts for slave traders. They knew the secret routes that smugglers used to move weapons and drugs. They knew where ancient battlefields lay forgotten, full of salvage and lost technology. We've survived by knowing what others don't, Hyunwoo explained one evening, showing Jiwan a star chart that glowed with hidden information. Every time we run, we learn something new. Every time we hide, we discover another secret. Knowledge is the one weapon that never runs out of ammunition. Jiwan also learned about human culture. She ate their food, strange combinations of flavors that sometimes tasted wonderful and sometimes made her tongue burn. She listened to their music, wild and emotional in ways that Valari songs never were. She watched their children play games that involved running and shouting and laughter. We remember Earth, Daehyun told her one night while repairing a power conduit. Not from seeing it. None of us were alive when it died. But we remember the stories. The oceans and mountains, the cities and forests. We teach our children about the home we lost, so they know what they're trying to survive for. Do you want to go back? Jiwon asked. Daehyun shook his head. Earth is dead. Radioactive ash and broken dreams. But someday, maybe our grandchildren will find a new home. A place where they can stop running and just live. On the 8th day, everything changed. Jiwon was on the Indomitable's bridge, reviewing sensor data with Hyunwoo, when the alarm screamed to life. Red lights flashed throughout the ship, and she heard the sound of running feet in the corridors outside. What's happening? Jiwon demanded. Korvath, Minji said, appearing at the door with her weapon ready. 3 ships. Hunter class. They found us. Hyunwoo's face went pale. How long? 12 minutes until weapons range, Daehyun said from his engineering station. They're fast. Military grade. Can we run? Hyunwoo asked. Not with our engines in this condition. We'd have to leave the asteroid field, and they'd catch us in open space. Daehyun's prosthetic hands flew across his controls. We're trapped. Jiwon felt ice in her stomach. She had read about Korvath hunter ships. They were built for one purpose: finding and destroying threats to the Dominion. They were fast, heavily armed, and crewed by warriors who never showed mercy. And they had never forgotten the humans. You need to go, Hyunwoo said to Jiwon. Get to your shuttle and run. Maybe they'll ignore you. Maybe they'll focus on us. I can't just leave you, Jiwon protested. Yes, you can. You have to. Hyunwoo grabbed her shoulders and looked into her eyes. You've helped us more than you know. But if you stay, you'll die with us. Jiwon ran to her shuttle, her heart pounding. She sealed the airlock and fired up the engines, pulling away from the Indomitable. Through her viewport, she could see the 3 Korvath ships approaching. Their hulls dark and angular, covered with weapons. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Deadly and efficient. She started to plot a course away from the battle, but her hands froze on the controls. If she ran, the humans would die. 200 people, including children, would be slaughtered because that's what the Korvath did to humans. No mercy, no prisoners, just extermination. She thought about her oath to the Velari Empire, about her duty as a navigator, about her career and her future. Then she thought about Hyunwoo's tired smile, and Daehyun's prosthetic arms, and Minji's hard eyes that had seen too much death. She thought about the children playing in the corridors, and the old woman welding pipes, and the ship that refused to die. Jiwon turned her shuttle around and opened a communication channel to the Indomitable. Captain Hyunwoo, I'm not leaving. Jiwon, don't be stupid. Too late. I'm already stupid. Remember? Now tell me your plan. There was a pause. Then Hyunwoo's voice came back, filled with something that might have been hope. All right, here's what we're going to do. The battle began exactly as the Korvath expected. The Indomitable tried to run, its engines flaring as it pushed deeper into the asteroid field. The Korvath ships pursued, confident and patient, knowing their prey was trapped. What they didn't expect was for the human ship to suddenly spin around and charge directly at them. Now, Hyunwoo shouted. Daehyun cut power to everything except engines and weapons. The Indomitable accelerated so fast that Jiwon saw the hull begin to glow from stress. Any other species would have been crushed by the G-forces. But humans came from a heavy gravity world, and they could take punishment that would kill anyone else. Minji fired the ship's weapons, not at the Korvath vessels, but at the asteroids around them. Rock exploded into fragments, creating a cloud of debris between the ships. The first Korvath ship tried to adjust course and slammed into an asteroid it couldn't see through the debris cloud. Its shields flared and failed, and the ship spun out of control. The second Korvath ship opened fire. But the Indomitable was already moving, weaving through spaces that no military ship could fit through. Plasma bolts hit asteroids instead, creating more explosions, more debris, more chaos. Jiwan followed Hyunwoo's orders, using her smaller shuttle to draw fire from the third Korvath ship. She led it into a section of the asteroid field where the rocks were dense and close together, forcing it to slow down or risk collision. Then Minji did something insane. A boarding pod shot out from the Indomitable, a tiny cylinder of metal that flew straight at the second Korvath ship. It attached to the hull with magnetic clamps, and Jiwan saw figures in spacesuits cutting through the armor with plasma torches. "They're boarding a Korvath warship?" Jiwan said in disbelief. "Humans fight dirty," Hyunwoo replied calmly. "It's how we survive." The second Korvath ship began to drift as the boarding party sabotaged its systems from inside. The third ship tried to come to its aid but ran into a trap. The Indomitable had positioned itself behind a large asteroid, and when the Korvath ship passed by, Daehyun fired every weapon they had at point-blank range. Shields flared and buckled, hull plating cracked and melted. The Korvath ship's engines sputtered and died. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, one Korvath ship was crippled and drifting. Another was disabled, with its crew evacuated into space. The third had retreated, fleeing back toward Korvath territory. The Indomitable hung in space, barely functional, held together by determination and luck. Smoke leaked from hull breaches. Entire sections were dark, but it was still flying. Jiwan docked her shuttle and ran to the bridge. Hyunwoo was there, looking exhausted but alive. Daehyun was frantically working to restore systems. Minji stood nearby, her spacesuit scorched and dented, but she was grinning. "We won," Minji said. "We actually won." "We survived," Hyunwoo corrected. "That's all we ever do." He looked at the disabled Korvath ship on his screen. The crew was drifting in escape pods, waiting for rescue. Hyunwoo could have destroyed them. After everything the Korvath had done to humans, no one would have blamed him. Instead, he opened a communication channel to the surviving Korvath. "Korvath ships, this is Captain Hyunwoo of the human vessel Indomitable. We are not executing your survivors. We are letting you live so you can deliver a message. Tell your commanders that humanity survived. Tell them we remember what was done to us. Tell them we don't forgive. But tell them we might be willing to negotiate." He closed the channel and turned to Jiwan. "Now they know," he said quietly. "The secret is out. Every empire in the galaxy will learn that humans are still alive. And they'll come for us." Jiwan nodded slowly. She understood what this meant. The humans couldn't hide anymore. The galaxy would respond to this news with fear and violence, unless someone helped them. "Captain Hyunwoo," Jiwan said, "I need to go back to my ship. I need to report what happened here. But I'm not going to report the truth." "What do you mean?" "I'm going to tell my commanders that I encountered a Korvath attack and received help from an unknown vessel. I'm going to recommend that the Velari Empire investigate who these unknown heroes were." Jiwan smiled. "And I'm going to make sure that when they find you, they see you the way I do, as survivors, not monsters." Hyunwoo looked at her for a long moment, then extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. "Thank you, Navigator Jiwan. You've given us something we haven't had in 2,000 cycles." "What's that?" "Hope." 3 weeks later, Jiwan stood in the Grand Council chamber of the Velari Empire and tried not to shake. The chamber was enormous, with walls that reached up into shadows and floors made of polished stone that reflected the light of 1,000 glowing crystals. At the far end sat the Empress herself, surrounded by advisors and generals and politicians who had spent their entire lives learning how to hold power. Jiwan was just a navigator, a nobody from the outer rim who should never have been in this room, but she had seen humans, fought alongside humans, and survived a Korvath attack that should have killed her. That made her interesting. That made her important. At least for now. "Navigator Jiwan," the Empress said, her voice carrying across the chamber like music. "Tell us about these unknown warriors who saved your life." Jiwan had practiced this speech 100 times. She had memorized every word, every pause, every emphasis. But now, standing here, she decided to tell the truth instead. "They were humans, Your Majesty." The chamber erupted in noise. Advisors shouted. Generals demanded explanations. Politicians argued with each other. their voices rising in panic and confusion. The Empress raised one hand, and silence fell instantly. "Humans are extinct," she said calmly. "The records are clear. Earth was destroyed. Every colony was eliminated. This happened 2,000 cycles ago." "The records were wrong," Jiwan said. She forced herself to stand straight, to look the Empress in the eyes. "Some humans survived. They've been hiding in the forgotten parts of the galaxy, scavenging and fighting and surviving. I met them. I spoke with their captain. I saw their ship and their families. They're real, Your Majesty. And now the Korvath know they exist. Then they will be hunted again," one of the generals said. "The Korvath will not tolerate this. They will mobilize their fleets and finish what they started." "Exactly," the Empress said. She leaned forward, studying Jiwan carefully. "Which is why we must decide what to do about this situation. Navigator, you have spent time with these humans. Are they dangerous?" Jiwan thought about how to answer. She thought about Hyunwoo's tired eyes, and Minji's hard smile, and Daehyun's prosthetic arms. "Yes," she said honestly. "They're very dangerous. They're survivors who have spent 2,000 cycles learning how to fight impossible odds. They use tactics that violate military conventions. They board enemy ships and sabotage them from inside. They turn asteroids into weapons and debris fields into traps. If you tried to hunt them, they would hurt you badly before they died." More shouting, more arguments. The Empress silenced them again. "But are they a threat to the Empire?" she asked. "No," Jiwan said firmly. "They don't want to conquer anyone. They don't want revenge. They just want to stop running. They want what every species wants: a home, safety, a future for their children." An advisor stepped forward, an old Veilari with silver hair and cold eyes. "Your Majesty, we cannot harbor humans. If we give them protection, the other empires will see it as an act of aggression. The Korvath will demand we hand them over. The Thelsians will pressure us diplomatically. We will be isolated." "He's right," another advisor added. "Besides, humans cannot be trusted. The history books were written by the winners," Jiwan interrupted. She knew she was being disrespectful, but she didn't care anymore. "Did you know that human doctors saved thousands of alien lives during the war? Did you know that some human colonies tried to negotiate peace and were destroyed anyway? Did you know that Earth refused to surrender because the terms demanded they hand over half their population for forced labor?" The chamber fell silent. Several advisors looked uncomfortable. "Where did you learn this?" the Empress asked. "From the sealed archives," Jiwan admitted. "I accessed files I wasn't supposed to see. Court-martial me if you want. But the truth is that we lied about humans. We made them into monsters so we could justify what we did to them. And now they're back, and we have to decide if we're going to repeat that mistake." The Empress studied her for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Navigator Jiwan. I haven't decided which yet." She looked around the chamber. "But you have given me much to think about. We will take a recess while I consider this matter." Jiwan was escorted to a waiting room where she sat alone for what felt like hours. She thought about Hyunwoo and his crew, hiding somewhere in the dark, waiting to see if the galaxy would try to kill them again. Finally, she was summoned back to the chamber. The Empress sat on her throne, looking tired. "I have made a decision," she announced. "The Veilari Empire will offer the humans protected status and resources. In exchange, they will serve as military contractors, helping us against the Korvath expansion." Jiwan felt relief wash over her, but one of the generals immediately objected. "Your Majesty, the Korvath will see this as a declaration of war. They hate humans. If we harbor them, then the Korvath will be angry," the Empress said calmly. "They are already expanding into our territory, destroying our allies, and threatening our borders. Perhaps it is time they remembered what it feels like to be afraid." "But the other empires," an advisor said. "The political consequences will be handled." The Empress looked at Jiwan. Navigator, you will return to the humans and deliver our offer. You are also promoted to captain and given command of a diplomatic vessel. You will serve as our liaison to the human fleet. Jiwan bowed deeply, almost unable to believe what was happening. Thank you, Your Majesty. But I should tell you, the humans may not accept your terms. Oh? And why not? Because they've been running for 2,000 cycles. They've learned not to trust anyone, especially empires that offer help. They'll see this as a trap. Then convince them otherwise, the Empress said. You're the only one they trust. Make them understand that this is their best chance at survival. Jiwan traveled back to the coordinates where she had last seen the Indomitable. The ship was gone, moved to a new hiding place. But she broadcast a message on the frequencies Hyunwoo had given her. 2 days later, the human ship appeared. Jiwan shuttled over and found Hyunwoo, Daehyun, and Minji waiting for her on the bridge. They looked wary and exhausted. Captain Jiwan, Hyunwoo said, noting her new rank insignia. Congratulations on your promotion. I assume you're here with news from your Empress? Jiwan explained the offer. As she spoke, she watched their faces carefully. Daehyun looked hopeful. Minji looked suspicious. Hyunwoo looked thoughtful. When she finished, there was silence. So we become your warriors, Minji said flatly. Your attack dogs, your hired killers. No, Jiwan said firmly. You become our allies. Partners. The Empress is offering you legitimacy, resources, and protection. In exchange, you help us fight the Korvath. Who are your enemies anyway? And after the war? Hyunwoo asked. What happens to us then? The Empress will sponsor your petition to join the Galactic Council as a full member species. You'll have a voice, a vote, recognition. Daehyun laughed bitterly. The same council that voted to exterminate us? They'll never accept us. Maybe not, Jiwan admitted. But you'll never know unless you try. And this is the best offer you're going to get. The galaxy knows you exist now. You can't hide anymore. So you have 3 choices. Accept the Velari offer, run until the Korvath hunt you down, or fight alone and die. Hyunwoo stood up and paced across the bridge. I need to discuss this with my crew. We vote on important decisions. That's how humans do things. You let everyone vote? Jiwan asked in surprise. Even in military matters? Especially in military matters, Minji said. We're all in this together. We all get a say in our future. The vote took 3 hours. Jiwan waited on the bridge while the crew gathered in the cargo bay. She could hear the arguments through the walls, voices rising and falling in passionate debate. Finally, Hyunwoo returned. The vote was close, he said. Many want to accept. Many want to refuse and keep running. But there was one voice that mattered most. Whose? Jiwan asked. Minji stepped forward. She looked older than Jiwan had realized. Her face lined with years of hardship. Mine. I'm the eldest survivor on this ship. I was born during the flight from Earth. I'm 63 years old. And I've spent my entire life running. She paused, gathering her thoughts. My grandparents didn't run so we could become servants. She continued. They ran so we could survive. But surviving isn't living. If the Velari want our help, we'll give it. But not as contractors. Not as hired weapons. As allies. As equals. Hyunwoo nodded. We have a counter-proposal. We'll help you against the Korvath. But as an independent fleet. We'll accept supplies and sanctuary. But we keep our autonomy. We make our own decisions. And when the war is over, you sponsor our petition to the Galactic Council, not as charity, but because we earned it. Jiwan smiled. I think the Empress will accept those terms. She's not looking for servants. She's looking for warriors who can make the Korvath afraid. And then we have a deal, Hyunwoo said. He extended his hand, and Jiwan took it. Welcome back to the galaxy, she said. Humanity has returned. 4 months after the alliance was formed, the human fleet arrived at the Battle of Kreshtar. The Velari colony world of Kreshtar had been under siege for 3 weeks. The Korvath Dominion had sent a full invasion fleet, 20 warships strong, and they were slowly grinding down the planet's defenses. Orbital stations burned in space. Cities were being bombed from above. Millions of Velari citizens were trapped, waiting for rescue that might never come. The Velari military had sent reinforcements, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Admiral Kelrick, commanding the defense fleet, knew they were losing. It was only a matter of time before Kreshtar fell. Then the humans arrived. 7 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. They weren't beautiful like Velari cruisers or intimidating like Korvath dreadnoughts. They were ugly, cobbled-together vessels that looked like they should have fallen apart years ago. But they were moving fast, and they were heading straight for the Korvath fleet. Admiral Kelrick opened a communication channel to the lead ship, the Indomitable. "Captain Hyunwoo, you're early. We weren't expecting you for another 2 days." Hyunwoo's voice came back, calm and steady. "We heard you were in trouble. Humans don't leave allies to die alone. The Korvath fleet outnumbers you almost 3 to 1, Kelrick warned. "This isn't going to be an easy fight." "We've never had an easy fight, Admiral. We'll manage." Jiwon watched from the bridge of her diplomatic cruiser as the human fleet formed up. The 7 ships moved with practiced precision. Despite their mismatched designs and varying capabilities, besides the Indomitable, there was the Defiance, a former mining vessel converted into a weapons platform. The Perseverance, built from salvaged Thelxian components. The Resurrection, cobbled together from 3 different wrecks. The Vengeance, bristling with stolen Korvath weapons. The Hope, serving as a mobile repair station. And the Remember Earth, the oldest surviving human vessel, kept flying through sheer determination. "All ships, this is Captain Hyunwoo," the human commander broadcast. "You know the plan. Hit them fast. Hit them hard. Make them remember why they were afraid of us." The human fleet accelerated, pushing their engines beyond safe limits. Jiwon saw the hulls beginning to glow from the stress. But the ships held together. The Korvath fleet saw them coming and adjusted their formation, clearly preparing to swat aside these primitive vessels. They had superior numbers, superior technology, and superior firepower. This should have been an easy victory. They had forgotten what humans were capable of when cornered. The Indomitable led the charge, driving straight into the center of the Korvath formation like a spear. Daehun had rerouted every spare bit of power to the forward shields, creating a barrier that could withstand the initial bombardment. Plasma bolts and missile fire slammed into the ship, but it kept coming. At the last second, the Indomitable suddenly dove downward, and the 6 other human ships followed in a maneuver that defied conventional tactics. They passed under the Korvath fleet's main guns, too close for the large weapons to track properly. Then Minji opened fire. The humans didn't try to destroy the Korvath ships. They didn't have enough firepower for that. Instead, they targeted specific systems: engine clusters, shield generators, sensor arrays, communication relays. Every shot was precisely calculated to cause maximum disruption with minimum ammunition. The Vengeance, covered with stolen Korvath weapons, fired on the Korvath flagship with its own technology. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The Korvath shields, programmed to defend against Velari and Thelxian weapons, were unprepared for their own plasma cannons. The flagship's shields flickered and failed in 3 sections. Admiral Kelrick saw the opening and ordered his fleet to attack. Velari warships poured fire into the gaps the humans had created, finally able to do real damage. But the Korvath weren't beaten yet. They adapted quickly, splitting their fleet to surround the human ships. Now the humans were trapped, caught in a killing zone with no escape. That's when the humans did something insane. The Resurrection, already badly damaged, suddenly accelerated directly at a Korvath cruiser. Jiwon watched in horror, thinking it was a suicide run. But at the last moment, the human ship fired every maneuvering thruster it had, spinning sideways and slamming into the Korvath vessel at an angle. The impact crushed both ships, but the Resurrection's crew had already evacuated in escape pods, picked up by the Hope. The Korvath cruiser, however, was now drifting out of formation, disabled and helpless. Did they just sacrifice their ship? Jiwan whispered. They're using themselves as weapons, Admiral Kelrick said, sounding both horrified and impressed. They know they can't win through firepower, so they're using mass and momentum instead. The Defiance followed the same tactic, ramming another Korvath ship and crippling it before the crew escaped. 2 human vessels destroyed, but 2 Korvath ships disabled. The odds were becoming more even. Then the boarding pods launched. Minji led a team of 50 human fighters, launching from the Indomitable in small, heavily armored pods. They attached to 3 different Korvath ships and began cutting through the hulls. What happened next would become legendary in military academies across the galaxy. The humans fought through the Korvath ships room by room, corridor by corridor. They used weapons that the Korvath had never seen before. Strange combinations of technology scavenged from a dozen different species. They moved in ways that seemed impossible, using the heavy gravity training of their ancestors to overpower Korvath soldiers who were stronger but slower, and they sang while they fought. Old human battle songs from Earth, passed down through generations. Songs about defiance and courage, and refusing to surrender. The Korvath soldiers heard the singing echoing through their ships and felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. Fear. One by one, the boarded Korvath ships went dark as humans took control of their critical systems. Some were disabled completely. Others had their weapons turned against their own fleet. The tide of the battle shifted. The remaining Korvath ships tried to retreat, but the Velari fleet had surrounded them. Admiral Kelrick demanded their surrender. And this time, the Korvath commander agreed. The Battle of Kreshtar was over. The colony was saved. Jiwan docked with the Indomitable after the battle ended. The ship looked even worse than before, covered with new scorch marks and fresh damage. But it was still flying, and its crew was alive. She found Hyunwoo on the bridge, looking exhausted but satisfied. Daehyun was already working on repairs, his prosthetic arms moving quickly over damaged controls. Minji stood nearby, her armor dented and scorched, but she was grinning. "We won," Minji said simply. "You didn't just win," Jiwan replied. "You changed everything. The galaxy just watched humans defeat a Korvath fleet. Every empire, every species, every government is going to see that footage and realize that humans are back." Hyunwoo nodded slowly. "Good. Let them see. Let them know that we survived. Let them know that we're not going away." "What happens now?" Jiwan asked. "Now we rebuild," Daehyun said, not looking up from his work. "We fix our ships, gather our people, and prepare for whatever comes next. The Galactic Council will vote on your petition in 6 months," Jiwan said. "The Empress is going to use this battle as evidence that humans deserve recognition. She's going to argue that you're not the monsters from the history books. You're defenders, protectors. Will it work?" Minji asked. "I don't know," Jiwan admitted. "Many species will vote against you because they're afraid. But some will vote for you because of what you did here today. You saved millions of Velari lives. That counts for something." Over the next 6 months, the story of the Battle of Kreshtar spread across the galaxy. The footage was shown on every news channel, analyzed by every military academy, and debated in every political forum. Some species called for humanity's extermination, claiming they were too dangerous to exist. Others argued for isolation, suggesting humans be confined to a specific sector and monitored constantly. But a growing number of voices spoke in support, pointing out that humans had fought to save lives, not take them. The day of the vote finally arrived. Jiwan stood in the Galactic Council chambers, a massive structure that orbited a neutral world at the galaxy's center. Representatives from 47 species filled the seats, each with their own opinions about whether humans deserve to exist. Captain Hyunwoo stood in the center of the chamber, representing all of humanity. He wore a new uniform, made by Velari tailors. But Jiwan noticed he had kept his old captain's insignia from the Indomitable. A small act of defiance, reminding everyone that humans didn't forget where they came from. The debate lasted for hours. The Korvath representative spoke passionately against recognition, describing humans as violent savages who would destroy the galaxy if given the chance. The Thelxian representative called for strict limitations on human activities. Others argued back and forth, their voices filling the chamber. Finally, it was Jiwan's turn to speak. She stood and faced the council, her heart pounding. "Honored representatives," she began. "I'm Captain Jiwan, of the Velari Empire. 6 months ago, I discovered that humans still existed, and it changed my life. I met Captain Hyunwoo and his crew. I saw how they lived, how they survived, how they fought." She paused, looking around the chamber. "Humans aren't monsters. They're survivors. Yes, they're dangerous. Yes, they fight with tactics that make us uncomfortable. But they do it because they've spent 2,000 cycles being hunted. They've learned to be fierce because gentleness meant death. They've learned to be ruthless because mercy was never shown to them. But at the Battle of Kreshtar, when Captain Hyunwoo had the chance to execute Korvath prisoners, he refused. When his crew could have taken revenge for Earth, they chose to save lives instead. That's not savagery. That's civilization. We tried to exterminate humanity once, and we failed. But that failure might be the best thing that ever happened to this galaxy. Because now we have a second chance. We can choose to repeat our mistakes, or we can choose to be better. We can choose to welcome humans back, not despite their strength, but because of it. The galaxy is facing dark times. The Korvath expand. Pirates raid our borders. Threats emerge that we're not prepared for. We need warriors who know how to fight impossible odds. We need survivors who refuse to give up. We need humans." She sat down, and silence filled the chamber. The vote was called. One by one, representatives cast their ballots. Jiwan watched the numbers climb. Her hands clenched together. In the end, humanity's petition passed by a single vote. The chamber erupted in mixed reactions. Some species cheered, others protested, but the decision was made. Humanity was officially recognized as a sovereign species with full rights and representation in the Galactic Council. Hyunwoo stood tall, accepting the news with quiet dignity. But Jiwan saw the tears in his eyes. Later, aboard the Indomitable, the crew celebrated. There was music and laughter and hope for the first time in generations. Children ran through the corridors, not as refugees, but as citizens of the galaxy. Jiwan found Hyunwoo standing alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Strange," he admitted. "My whole life, I've been running. My parents ran. My grandparents ran. For 6 generations, humans have been ghosts, hiding in the dark. And now you're home," Jiwan finished. Hyunwoo smiled. "Not quite. We still don't have a planet. We're still living on ships. But for the first time, we don't have to hide. We can exist openly. We can build a future. What will you do now?" "First, we'll find the other survivor groups and bring them in from the cold. Then we'll start looking for a world to settle. Somewhere we can finally stop running and start living." He looked at Jiwan. "And we'll remember the ones who helped us. We'll remember you, Captain Jiwan, the alien girl who saw humans on her scanner and decided to give us a chance." Jiwan smiled. "I just wanted to know the truth. You got more than truth. You got friends, allies, and you gave us something we thought we'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope," Hyunwoo said. "You gave us hope." Outside the viewport, the stars shined bright and endless, full of possibilities. Humanity had returned to the galaxy, not as conquerors or victims, but as survivors who had earned their place among the stars. And they were home at last.